Good evening, Libertarians. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of LPTV, our town hall. I'm going to be joined tonight by several guests, and we're going to be talking about the unrest that is gripping our country, talking about some of the issues that are facing not just libertarians, but our country as we deal with what is obviously a broken system. And for libertarians, it's a frustrating thing because for a long time, we've been talking about demilitarizing the police. We've been talking about community policing. We've been talking about the fact that policing is not being done in a fair way in our country right now, especially, related to drug laws, stuff like that. But if you think it's frustrating for a libertarian to say we've been saying this stuff for a long time, imagine what it's like to be an African-American libertarian and be in that community. And to that end, I'm going to bring in my first guest, John Monds. John, thank you so much for joining us on LPTV.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I'm going to introduce you a little bit. Presidential candidate, obviously in 2020, candidate for governor of Georgia when you got over 1 million votes. And what other fascinating thing? A Morehouse man, of course. What other fascinating things should I tell people about you?
Well, one correction, that the race that I got 1 million votes in was actually in 2008. That was the cycle before governor, and that was for a statewide office.
Got it.
And then I ran for governor in 2010. I've been an active member of the NAACP for a number of years. Worked locally in my community, working with programs like Habitat for Humanity, building homes for those low-income individuals. Doing a lot of stuff in the local community, and a longtime active and happy Libertarian Party member.
That's a great thing to know, because one of the things that libertarians talk about all the time is that there really are all of these voluntary organizations out there that people can be a part of that don't require government. For example, Habitat for Humanity, which builds houses, and that we need to be the change that we want to see in the world. So I'm really happy to hear you talk about being involved in those things in your community. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about today is Juneteenth. And I grew up in Texas, and we always celebrate Juneteenth on June 19th. But my understanding is that in Georgia, it's a different day. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My father and side of the family is from Georgia. My family's been here for almost 160 years. And in his hometown, Thomaston, Georgia, which is in Upson County, their holiday is actually called May 29th. And wow. It's celebrated on the Saturday closest to Memorial Day weekend. And that's because that's when they heard the Emancipation Proclamation back in 1863, which was earlier than they heard it in Texas. And that's one of the reasons why you have a disparity of dates is because it really depends on the local communities a lot of times and what day they heard the proclamation. For example, in my town that I live in now, Cairo, Georgia, which is right above the Florida line in Southwest Georgia, that community celebrates what they call May Day, and their day was May the 20th. And that's the same day also in Tallahassee, Florida, that they celebrate and have a reading of the Emancipation Proclamation every year. So that's why you have some different dates across the country, but they all are celebrating the same thing. And that was freedom, at least the declaration of it, with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right. And it's fascinating, too, that, it hits different areas and different times. And so you talked about Georgia. We talked about Texas. Let's talk briefly about Connecticut. Welcome to the show, Dr. Aaron Lewis. Dr. Lewis, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here. Glad to see John Monds as well.
Outstanding. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever met before, but here's a quick little introduction. John, Aaron, Aaron, John. Now, what about in Connecticut? When do you guys celebrate Juneteenth in Connecticut?
Yes, since 2003.
So it's a much more modern thing there. And do you guys use June 19th as the date, or is it something else?
Yes, we do. We typically use June 19th, but it fluctuates, and for the most part, it's always on the last Friday closest to June 19th that it's celebrated every single year.
Gotcha. Interesting. So let me talk a little bit too. We talked about Juneteenth and sort of this celebration, and it's a unique thing. A lot of people are talking right now about the idea that Juneteenth is in reality one of the most American holidays because it truly celebrates liberty. And I wonder if you guys can talk to a little bit about that, about celebrations that you've been to in the past, what they've been, what happens if you've gone to a Juneteenth celebration. And why don't we go in reverse order, since I had John Monds on first. We'll go with you, Dr. Lewis, and then I'll come to you, John, with that question.
I mean, when you talk about liberation, as well as our Emancipation Proclamation for every person of color, the day that we were free from oppressive laws, oppressive policies, would be a celebratory moment for people of color. So it is our Independence Day more than any other day for us. July the 4th, for many people of color, don't resonate in the same way because we didn't receive the same. We were not factored into the deal like some of our other, American counterparts, and as a result, it's not a real reason to celebrate like other people in America would. When on the 4th of July, for us, it can actually be considered a very painful moment because there was a lot of treacherous behavior that was still going on under the name and guise of the law. So this is a special moment for us to commemorate freedom, which is really what equality is all about.
And that's a great point. And so I've heard people talk about that beforehand. And people, friends of mine, African American, have said, July 4th, that's not our big holiday. That's not our big Independence Day. And I wonder, John, I don't know if you've heard that talk before, anything like that, but talk about what Juneteenth celebrations have meant to you and what they've been like.
Well, like I said earlier, Georgia also recognizes Juneteenth and has been doing so, I believe, since 2011. But in my dad's hometown, they've had a parade, and this has been going on continuously since 1863. I believe it's they claim to be the longest continuous celebration of freedom in the country. And I've been to several. I haven't been to some recently, but I've been to them in the past. And they normally have a speaker. You march down from downtown to Lincoln Park, which is an area, an African American community, and that's where they have a speaker. They have vendors with food, and a lot of people just gather and have a great time. In South Georgia, I know they had a part of the ceremony was called platting the maypole, African American community, and that's where they have a speaker. They have vendors with food, and a lot of people just gather and. Hello? Okay.
Yeah, you still there, John? Sorry, we're getting a little echo for a second. Yeah. Tara's on it.
Okay. In South Georgia, they had what they call platting the maypole, and this was something that was done at schools, in which they'd have different colored streamers. And kids would go in and out.
Yeah, exactly.
About it, in and out around the maypole, and also you'd get a day off from school, and it was truly celebrated as a holiday. And unfortunately, a lot of these celebrations have kind of gone by the wayside. I know in Cairo, where I live, it's not really celebrated. Thomasville, which is in the community next to us, the next county over, there was some interest in kind of restarting the celebration, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. But it definitely in the past was akin to the 4th of July. I mean, it was you know, a time for celebration and remembrance and hope, you know, across different communities all across the country.
So that. Thank you very much for those recollections. It's a fascinating thing. I want to touch on something that I talked about in the very beginning. That, you know, right now we have this period of civil unrest going on. People are protesting and asking for, you know, demilitarizing the police, things that, you know, libertarians have been asking for a long time. Talking about police brutality, things that libertarians have been talking about a long time. And, you know, I mentioned at the front of the show that it's frustrating for libertarians, but it must be especially frustrating for African-American libertarians because, you know, you guys, you've known this, right? The names that Americans are learning right now. I mean, Americans who have, you know, forgotten Trayvon Martin, Americans, you know, who had never heard of Breonna Taylor, you know, have forgotten Eric Garner, all those things. But in the African-American community, these are battles for liberty and battles for justice that have been going on for a long time. Can you talk about what it means to be both libertarian and Black at this point in time and having conversations with people who have been unaware of these things beforehand? Dr. Lewis, let's go with you first.
I mean, you know that I write extensively on various topics. One of them includes the topic of race. I mean, you know, for people of color, it's not new to us. This is not something that's new. This has happened for centuries. So the strange response and reactions from white people is bizarre because most of my white friends are acting as, and they will even say that, you know, what is all this tension about? And you know, and why are these people, you know, starting racism? And I'm thinking to myself, do you hear yourself? You know, racism is not starting; it's always been here. And I always give the analogy of a cancer that's in remission. I mean, anytime we don't see what's happening now, it's only cancer that's in remission. And you could eat the wrong food, be in the wrong environment, or have some anxiety, and that cancer will begin to metastasize through the body. And the reason why it still exists in the way that it does is because the policy that is in place has never been written for Black people. And which is one of the reasons, the main reasons that I'm a part of the Libertarian Party as a hope to counter a two-party system, both of whom have clearly not included people that look like me in their original plan. We've been the byproduct, we've been the end result, we've been the pawn, we've been the indentured servants as a part of the plan, but we've never been a part of the original plan, which includes justice, equity, and a word that we don't even use anymore, dignity, just dignity. And so when I look at people that look like me, I look at dignity. I look into the eyes and the face of dignity. That's not what many people can say in America when they look at a Black man in particularly. They see the stereotype of people that have labeled an entire group of people from a diaspora for 400 years. And so when I think about this, I think about the pervasive ignorance of people that persist in, you know, and then think about it. We are in 2020. You know, when you really want to know, it's like, come on, man. I could see if this was the 60s, the antebellum South, you know, the days of the Confederacy. We are in 2020. It's like all of us need to grow up. This shouldn't even be a topic. I've told people that We ought to be talking about, making sure that we keep ourselves safe from aliens from outer space.
So that's a great point. You talk about the fact that, it's 2020, and, in our lifetime, we've been through this whole transition. But so let me ask you, John Monds, has it gotten better? People say, the light, we want it to keep getting brighter. Has it gotten better? Have you seen progress as somebody who, has been involved in politics, and, you've obviously been a leader in the Libertarian Party for a long time? Are we getting better as a country politically?
I would say in some areas, yes. I mean, we do not have it, and I can speak personally. I know I don't have it as bad as my ancestors did. Mm-hmm. So yes, there has been progress, most definitely, and hopefully my kids won't have to deal with some of the things that I had to deal with growing up, whether that was up north in Michigan or in the South where I finished high school. So I mean, there's progress being made, but the fact is we still have a long way to go. And one of the questions you said earlier was being Black and being in the Libertarian Party. This is the place to be, and I love sharing, my advocacy, with anybody in any realm, whether their background is Republican or Democrat, or whether they're of different ethnicities, because what it boils down to is freedom, and there's no other party out there. We can hold our platform up to any party out there. And if you're talking about being free, then nobody can hold a candle to us. So I agree with Dr. Lewis that what's going on today is nothing new. This has been going on forever. It's just been some cases that now with the advent of video and cell phones, that more cases come to light, but there's a history of lynching and all kinds of behaviors. We can talk about Tulsa, Black Wall Street. We can talk about the riots in Atlanta, and in Rosewood. Yeah. This is nothing new, but hopefully our response is better. Doing things like one thing we did in Grady County several years ago to try to head off an incident happening is having a town hall with the police chief and the sheriff, who were very willing to do so. They said, hey, man, we'd love to talk to the community. And it was an opportunity for the community to come together and ask questions of the leaders in law enforcement in our area. The unfortunate thing about it was there wasn't a lot of the public that showed up. I was very disappointed. But I was glad to be a part of it and ask some of the tough questions. Some were answered, some weren't. When you talk about police procedure and policy, and what kind of weapons they have, you talked about demilitarization of the police. Those are some of the topics that came up. Those are going to be part of the continuing conversations that we have going forward. So, we are definitely in the right place.
I appreciate that. And so I want to bring in another guest. I first met him when he was running for governor in California, Nickolas Wildstar. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, I know that I don't know how much you guys have met each other yet, but I'm very happy.
Not yet.
All right. I'm very happy. Yeah, I'm happy to know you guys. I wonder if you could talk now. So, guys, I'm going to dispense the formality. I'm going to start calling y'all all by your first name, if that's okay. All right. Good enough. So Nickolas, let me ask you, do you prefer Nickolas? You prefer Wildstar?
Either or, just as long as you remember me, my man.
Well, fortunately, you have guided me significantly. I've sought your advice several times over the years, and I appreciate you giving it to me. So as somebody who, you're now running for office, okay, and we have this big period of unrest. do you feel like to a certain extent your campaign is impacted because the number one thing that people want to talk to you is about being black and what's happening, as opposed to just being the candidate for governor? Or has it given you an opportunity to actually say, look, this is why my campaign is so important?
I believe it's a little bit of both. I think it comes with the territories when you're a unicorn, which is a black man in the Libertarian Party. I mean, let's just be honest, but it's predominantly, majority white membership. So being a black man involved in the Libertarian Party already sets you apart as a candidate. And when you come on the scene, when you offer the ideas of what you can do to disassemble the police departments and, decriminalize drugs and, get rid of licensure, gun licensure, occupational licenses, those sorts of things that have impacted the black community, it sort of gives us an advantage because, the Libertarian Party has always advocated for those types of liberties, whether you're black, white, or, any shade of brown in between. So that's the beautiful part of being able to stand on such a valued principle. And again, I guess when it comes to you being a candidate, running for office, is to be expected that it's going to come up, the whole black-white issue at some point, especially when you're speaking of these issues. So it's given me an advantage because I am accustomed to those types of, egregiances and violations personally. And I know friends and family members that have. So it gives me an opportunity to speak on those issues. Now, being given a platform to do so is another story. That's hard to find,
Right.
The mainstream media doesn't want to give us much of the limelight because they know if they were to do so, we would steal away that large voting block away from the Democratic Party that has heavily relied on them and their policies to change what happens in the inner cities and people of color. The same thing for those black people that are involved with the Republican Party that are seeking to minimize government and, their involvement in our personal affairs, us being able to manage our own money. And these, again, are very popular ideas to where if we were to be given a larger soapbox, I think would definitely get us some wins. I know for sure John Monds.
Well, and so that's a great thing. I'll go to John on this next question. Is there a point in time at which you have had some sort of interaction with the press where you think to yourself, you know what, I'm not getting the coverage here, and you're wondering, is it because I'm the Libertarian candidate, or is it because I'm an African American candidate? Can you cut it that fine? I like the fact that Nickolas said, unicorn. There's situations where we don't know exactly what the scenario is, and we have to try to figure out what the bias is that's against us. Can you talk to that as somebody who, obviously has a lifetime of bias against you in various stages?
Well, I've been very fortunate. We've done a lot of great groundwork here in Georgia. So the times where I ran for office 5 times now, I did not see the bias, other than what would happen to anybody as far as being a part of a so-called third party. I had the opportunity to do TV debates, televised debates. I was invited to all the forums, and a lot of times forums that my opponents would not even show up to. I've always been open to going wherever I'm welcome. So no, I hadn't, to my knowledge, experienced bias other than you're not going to get a lot of coverage, but the AJC down here, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, has given us good coverage and stories in the past. Like say, Georgia Public Broadcasting has invited us to debates with the other candidates. So I've had a very good experience running for office here in Georgia. And I think that's because of the groundwork, like I said, that the leadership and the Libertarian Party of Georgia has laid out for decades. And we've been able to have some success and earn some respect across the board.
Right. So that's good. I'm unmuted. So that's an interesting thing. And you talk about the media coverage and stuff like that. Now, Dr. Lewis, when you ran for mayor in Hartford, you actually got a couple of good articles published in the paper. One of the things that I'm interested in is finding out, is there a difference between, you coming back to your community? We talked about first being Black in the Libertarian Party. Can you talk about what it's like to be libertarian in the Black community? And you know what, guys, as crazy as it sounds, I have something going on in the background. I'm going to have to go take care of it real quick. So please continue the discussion among yourselves right now, and I'll be back as soon as I can.
Absolutely. I didn't have the same experience as Brother Monds did with regards to everyone being 100% welcoming, particularly as a libertarian. And real interestingly, my biggest opposition outside of fair fighting came from the Democratic Party in Connecticut. I was blackballed. I was lied on. The Democratic town committee chair prefabricated stories, tried to malign my name in the Hartford Current. And so it's a different animal in Hartford. Hartford is the city that is perhaps around 28 to 30% Black people, people of the diaspora, and then you have another 38 or so percent Latinos from varying places, mostly Puerto Rico, that that make up the demographics of Hartford. However, the remaining people that are Asian and perhaps close to 15 or 20% Caucasian people, they run the city. And so I've said this before publicly, that as much as Black people have complained about racism and tried to tag that whole racist agenda and stigma on Republicans, my experience, I can't speak for anybody else, has been that white people in the Democratic Party in its higher tier, I'm not talking about entry level Democrats, I'm talking about those that have been career professionals, that on the state level, that are on the state committees, the Democratic State Committee, the Democratic National Committee, that the white people that obtain those positions are arguably some of the most racist white people that I've experienced in my life. And what they have strategically done is not only alienate and segregate people that look like me and those of us that are on this line from being able to disseminate truth to them by making them believe that the Democratic Party is the only party for Black people, the only party for Latino people. And I'm an outspoken critic of the lies that are being told. It's not the party for Black people. It's not the party for Latino people or any minority for that matter. It's a party that very safely, I can say, started out being a party that represented the interests of a people that were disenfranchised. And then after 64, after the Civil Rights Bill was passed, seemed to have been the place where Black people called home. But one of the things that I'm very eager to do is to help people of color to understand that if a house is burning down, it's all right to leave. It's all right to leave that house. Because at this point, a lot of people that look like me believe that even if a house is burning down to the ground, they are still committed to stay there. and they still call it home. And it's all right to change an address. It's all right to move. So I'm trying to appeal to people of color that because you've been in a house for a long time, 50, 60 years, and some people in this country far longer than that, that we need to begin a process of reevaluating. Does this party work for me? If you're in your 80s, my father, made his transition back in December. He was 89 years old. He's an immigrant of Jamaica, West Indies. Great man. He was a bishop in the Church of God. He lived a great life. He was a lifelong Democrat, lifelong since he got to the country in 1955. But I remember going to the nursing home and talking to him about politics while I was running for mayor, and just before he made his transition, and he told me, he said, I no longer have faith in the politics of America. This is an 89-year-old dying man. And the reason why is because he believed that the Democratic Party had totally changed from 1955 until 2019. And he's right. It's not the same party. It doesn't have the same interest. It doesn't have the same focus. And so a lot of times in our community, as in even some Caucasian communities, particularly in Europe and Italy and Ireland, and I've visited all over Europe and Germany, we have, and I always think that we're even, we've got a little bit of an advantage when it comes to oral tradition. It's just natural for us. We pass things down to our young people orally. We're gifted at that. It's just, don't even hate on us. It's just something that we just got. and so when we were given an oral tradition from our ancestors to tell us how, things should be, we forgot to evaluate time, space, reality. There was a certain time when that advice was awesome, but when that advice is no longer relevant to where we live right now, then we have to consider changing. And I believe that the most drastic times that we're living in is today, particularly for people of color who are hook, line, and sinker signed up, for the Democratic Party. They, it's like, right. It's their God, it's their everything. And so that's something that to me completely needs to be reviewed, because it's not that same party anymore. And unfortunately, it hasn't been that same party in a very long time. And I'd love to hear what my brothers are thinking about the question as well.
Actually, I got a cosign on what you're talking about, because like Malcolm X put it, you have the house slaves and then field slaves. And the house slaves definitely don't belong in the field because they care too much about the property. And the house is burning down. They're willing to lay their own lives on the line to protect it. We see that happening with the Democratic Party, and it's shifting openly to becoming a socialist party. They even have openly started to brand themselves as democratic socialists.
Right.
And it's unfortunate that they're taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge of different political philosophies and how they work and what history, whether it be Mussolini or Hitler or, George W. Bush. Political, how those political bodies actually apply to society. So, I'm with you. I've experienced more prejudice from the Black community when it comes to being invited in and embraced as a libertarian. Are we like Republicans, and do we want to just get rid of welfare? And it's like, once you explain a lot of the ideas, then they understand it more, but it's still because of the conditioning that has happened over decades, over centuries even, to the Black community over that dependency on these political parties, these two parties to provide for them, that where they kind of don't want to even take into accordance that another party could be better fitted for them. I believe that Brother Monds would probably, or what's up, Alex Merced in the house.
Hey, how you doing, Nick? How you
Yeah,
doing?
let me join in. Make two quick points, and Alex, I'd love to hear what you have to say. One is if you're a student of history, you'll understand that one, the North was in some respects as racist as the South. Now the South gets a bad name, of course,
Right.
but of course, you know, I grew up in Michigan, and when I talked to my parents and my grandparents about some of the things that they faced in Michigan, in Illinois, and over in Chicago, it wasn't, you know, as pretty. Like the North was some, you know, oasis for a lot of folks. That's one point that I'd like to make. So, you know, hearing about some of the things that you're facing, Dr. Lewis, in Connecticut, most people are like, oh no, they're great up there, right? That's one point. The other point is paradigm shifts. Now, before the 60s, and Republicans try to make this point for a different reason, but the African American community were, I'd say, 90+% Republican, from Abraham Lincoln, you know, all the way through the 60s. And a lot of people, even in the civil rights movement, were still Republicans. Some to this day. Some of the older generations have never given up on the Republican Party. But what Republicans are selling now, trying to attract African Americans, hopefully it won't work because of their track record. And that's also, I think, a good point, an advantage we have. You know, I talk just as bad about Democrats as I do Republicans, because they're both horrible. Yeah. And, you know, we have an opportunity, you know, to really make hopefully a new paradigm shift. We're not going back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, but throw libertarians into the mix.
Yes, just before Alex says something, I just wanted to bring out the point also in some of the diabolical moves, the unfair moves of the Democratic Party that so many Black people don't realize was not Republican, certainly wasn't libertarian, far from libertarian, even with regards to the destruction of the Black family. I mean, the welfare system that was set up where, you know, if the father was anywhere juxtaposed, anywhere near to the house that you know, young lady lived in, that was, you know, his child's mother, her welfare would be completely shut off. Her housing would be taken away from her. The Democrats devised these plans to destroy the Black family. But yet at the same time, as long as they were giving them money, they didn't know that the same one that was giving them money was also feeding them poison at the same time. I mean, you know, let's be quite honest. You know, even though Mr. Reagan began the process. Actually, Nixon started the war on drugs, and then Reagan, you know, the baton was passed over to him. But then from Reagan, it went to Bill Clinton, who had to prove to the American public, particularly people that were afraid of Black folks, that we are, you know, number one, like Mr. Clinton's wife said, that we are super predators, right? Black men are super predators, and that we're going to be so tough on war that we're going to make sure that we have mandatory minimums. That was under a Democratic president. And so I'm just wanting to remind people that look like me that there's a history of deceptive undercutting, things that have been so divisive, so evil, so wicked that, listen, people say to me, well, so Dr. Lewis, are you a Republican now? And I said, well, let me tell you something. The person who, first of all Republicans are not racist, all right? To say that would be wrong. It would be untrue. But what I do love, listen to me, this is going to sound crazy. What I do love about racist Republicans is that I know that they racist. You know what I'm saying? Right? I know they racist. So it doesn't faze me, because at least they let me know where they live. They get a piece of chalk and draw around their house and say, don't come. I'm good. It's the racist Democrats that work with you, that work on your campaign with you, but then stab you in the back. It's the ones, you know, like the law of the lid, that don't want you to go but so high in the corporate ladder, and they do things in an undercutting way. Man, I'm trying to tell you, they have done some things that they are going to have to answer for, because it's been completely wicked. And first and foremost, for people of color, it's the complete disregard. Yes, this is Democrats. The disregard, the disrespect, and the dismantling of the Black family unit. That, you know, and Alex, take it from there. Take it from there.
First off, I just want to say that it's been amazing to hear you guys' experiences. That was some very powerful stuff, and I definitely have some other questions for you. I just wanted to kind of speak to them and just empathize, because as a Latino libertarian, I've also kind of run into some of what you guys have mentioned about, where you kind of see pushback from your community when you go back to bring them these ideas, where they're like, okay, we've been Democrats, we should always be Democrats, just because that's just the way things work. You know, I do think that corner is turning. I definitely feel there's some momentum as far as the inclusivity and the approachability of libertarianism in politics, and I thank you guys for being really at the forefront of that, and that's big hug to all of you. But basic, yes. And then with that, just kind of with this sentiment, and I think there's really at the core of Juneteenth, there's a real libertarian sentiment that we're not free till we're all free, and that's
right.
a beautiful sentiment, and kind of touches my heart. But can you guys tell me a little bit about some of the experiences in your campaigns, reaching out to voters, where you feel like moments where you felt like you broke through some of that cognitive dissonance? Because there's a lot of that, like you were mentioning, with the policies like the Democrats want, where they want a lot of policies where, in both sides, they always want more things to be crimes, more things to be whatnot. And then those are the things that create this whole situation that is pernicious to poor communities, to minority communities. And we're seeing that is a big part of the conversation today. But I mean, in your conversations, in your campaign, sort of, where do you feel when you're reaching out to people in different communities, you feel like the conversation breaks through?
Well, first of all, when I ran in the city of Hartford, I started a school in the city of Hartford, second to eighth graders. It's a supplementary school that emphasizes literacy, foreign language, and STEM fields for second to eighth graders. And so I ran on education, and I was completely shocked that the years of advocacy, the years of fighting for Blacks and Latinos in the city of Hartford, that I didn't have a more overwhelming response from the community. There were things that the incumbent did to block all of my progress. Definitely the Democratic chair did literally illegal things to stop my visibility, my progress. The Hartford Current is completely complicit with the Democratic Party in Hartford. So it's the good old boys club. And one of the things about politics, you have to have skin and to just keep on moving forward despite what they do. I'm going to keep running for public office because I'm going to keep making that statement that we're here and we're not going away. And that's one of the things that I think that I'm extraordinarily happy about. My fellow brothers on this broadcast this evening, that they are not going away. I love that about y'all, all of y'all, all three of y'all on this. You're not going away, because that's what they want us to do, is to go away. We're in a very strategic position to make some tremendous things happen. But the things that they do to try to discourage us, we just have to be that much more intentional. And within the Black and Latino community, I can speak for the state of Connecticut, there's a level of apathy. There are some people that say that Blacks and Latinos in Hartford, in Bridgeport, in Waterbury don't want anything. And the reason why they say that is not to be disparaging about people of color, because anytime a Puerto Rican or a Black person is disparaging another Black person or Puerto Rican person, much like Candace Owens, I tune them out all the way, because I can't talk to them. I lost you now, because there's a way to have a conversation about Black folks without perpetuating the cycle that there's something wrong with us. And so I think that she has mental illness, and I've said that publicly, because you don't disparage another person to make your point. And Blacks and Latinos are beautiful, intelligent, wonderful, amazing people that are worthy. You understand? But the problem is that, and I love the word that my brother Wildstar said just a moment ago, we've been conditioned. So I'm not mad at you, but I know that there's work that has to be done with unconditioning us. We've been conditioned to take from the oppressor and be very excited about it, to take, the welfare, to take the subsidy from the one that's killing us, the one that's trying to demise our future, but we're not aware of it. And so we've also been conditioned to not ask or to not know what to ask for. How can you vote for a person who doesn't care about education when the children represent the now and the future? So if you're thinking, more about your police force than you're thinking about education, something's wrong. And we believe in having a strong police force. I don't believe in defunding police, as the culture is saying now, because right now they're not paid enough. And if they have to do 3 and 4 people's job, trust me, they're not going to just kill black folks. They're killing everybody. You understand? They're going to be overworked and underpaid. So I'm not really there on the concept of defunding the police. But black people need to be taught, and I would even say by black people, how to think about politics, not by white Democrats. You understand? Because a white Democrat, and I'm not saying all, so I'm not generalizing, but many, particularly those at the top level, the white Democrats are going to teach black people, especially impoverished black people, how to think in a way to keep them elected so that they can perpetuate the cycle of their crimes against humanity. That's what they do. And so we have to understand, number one, that the party is not, the Democratic Party is not the savior party. That's the first thing that they have to understand. It's not the savior party. I love the fact that libertarianism represents, like my brother John Monds said, it represents freedom. It is the only party that stands out with that ethic, freedom and liberty, the only party. And secondly, it represents for every black person, Latino, every minority on the planet, anybody that comes through these shores and touches America, it represents a choice. And so when you hijack the system where you got this big giant bald eagle and you got one wing called the Republicans and the other wing called the Democrats, it's the same bird and they're flying the same place. One hangs out in the south, during the winter. The other one hangs out in the north it's the same bird. And when you don't understand that, you get caught out. And that's where I think most Americans are. I think most Americans need to be libertarians and say the heck with this nonsense. I'm leaving a parties that don't represent the interests of the people, because as you were saying and alluding to, Alex, that if we're not all free, none of us are free. And so we have to get back to that mentality that when you suffer, I feel it. You understand? So we have to understand the balance of both individualism, which I believe in, and collectivism, which I believe in. You can't have both, and there can't be a healthy balance of both. And it looks nothing like socialism, and God knows it looks nothing like not socialism, communism. Nothing like it. It has no semblance of that. It looks like the America that we envisioned could be a reality, and that's what I really believe.
Well, Alex, in answering your question about moments when you think you've had a breakthrough, a lot of times you don't know, but that's why messaging is so important. It's like planting seeds. You don't know if it's going to germinate in somebody's mind or not, but you have to keep planting seeds. So we have an opportunity. I know I do, in approaching issues and maybe giving people different perspectives. I talked about ending cash bail, civil forfeiture, and what that does, not just to black people, but to all people. I know I had an opportunity to go on an African-American radio station, and the topic of criminal justice reform came up. And I said, well, we have to end. You start with ending the drug war. And they were like, well, what drugs? I said, all drugs. And so that's something, that I could, give and speak to. My sister-in-law actually died of a drug overdose. And, so you have to go out there and speak to these issues that a lot of times the other parties aren't going to bring up. Talking about the Second Amendment. If anybody should be in favor of carrying weapons to protect themselves, it should be the African American community. And
Absolutely.
Historically, we've always wanted to have better ways of protecting ourselves. This phenomena now that's in vogue probably since the 70s of, well, we want to get rid of people's ability to have guns and carry guns. This is a new phenomenon. We've always wanted to be able to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities. So I encourage folks. I carry a gun probably 80–90% of the time. And I encourage anyone, if you can legally do so, purchase a firearm and learn how to use it. Whether it's my kids, my family, my college classmates, high school classmates. So we can talk to issues like that. But these are issues that are common with any and everybody. Having the police, not protecting you. I gave a talk, for example, back in November of last year, and I made 3 points, but I thought, and this was a predominantly African-American crowd, non-libertarian. But out of those 3 points, I think one of the most important ones I made to them, and I think they got it, was this: the government is not your friend. And I gave them 400 years of examples. And now they're not going to hear that from the Democrats. They're not going to hear that from Republicans, but they'll hear it from a libertarian or somebody like me or anybody on this panel or in the party, because historically it's very accurate. The government is not, and that in itself should change people's mindset. I said, if you look at who's been causing the problems in our communities, should you go to them and look for answers? And that is ridiculous. But that's a lot of times what these other parties are preaching. Elect me, put me in charge. My party or the government will solve your problems. How are they going to do that when vast majority of the problems are caused by the government? Whether it's housing discrimination and ghettos and criminal police, law enforcement. These are all government agents, discrimination, across the board. So we have to message clearly that freedom is the answer. And whether it resonates or whether it clicks with somebody, we may not know until, down the line somewhere. But, we're doing what we need to be doing.
That is that false sense of security that government creates, is the reliance upon them that they have the answers, when really they don't. They're just regular people like us, and they don't have some, magical machine that's giving them the right answer to solve homelessness or, the drug problem or domestic abuse or whatever the case may be. So for them to assume the position and to create laws that dictate our society is where they're over exercising their power. So the confusion comes in thinking in what's lawful and what's legal, and us having the natural right, the natural lawful right to protect ourselves should never be infringed upon. And we don't need a piece of paper to tell us that's okay. We need a piece of paper to tell the people that we put in positions of power that that's okay, and to protect and respect that natural right. That's what the Constitution is there for. So in educating the Black community about how gun reform could definitely be advantageous for us, license reform could be advantageous for us, drug policy reform, criminal justice reform, all of these different social conditions that have affected our community the most, how we can change them through the Libertarian Party is the hump that we're trying to get over here, the hurdle here in the middle of the road. But what Alex is talking about is right. It's we're not free until all of us are free. And actually, I was out collecting signatures for the recall of the governor here, and a Mexican gentleman walked up to me and he said, I just want to tell you, I appreciate everything that the Black people in this country have done in fighting for freedom, because that's actually made it easier to pave the way for the Hispanic community. You guys, Black people fought alongside Mexicans in the Mexican-American Revolutionary War. So it's basically a matter of us coming together in union and knowing that solving the Black issues also solves the brown issues. And if we can articulate this in a way to where more people of color are embracing and supportive of those ideas, they'll start to vote Libertarian. We have to encourage them to do so if they want to do so civilly and peacefully through the electoral system, opposed to going out there and, having to protest continuously every time there's a murder or some sort of issue that we're all upset about societally. So hopefully everyone out there that's watching this video will be encouraged to get involved in the party. I got to say, Brother Lewis, though, with regards to defunding the police, I'm all about that. Here in California, budget for police is completely inflated, and they're overpaid. The majority of police officers receive 6 to 8 times the median salary here in the state of California.
Wow.
In those police shootings, they're often given administrative leave with pay for months,
Wow.
before they're end up having to retire or let go. But then they're still able to collect their pension.
Wow.
Another 6 figures and millions of dollars that we, the people, the taxpayers, Black community, brown community, white community, all community ends up footing the bills for. So I think it would be advantageous for us to start focusing on ways to where we could start paying them based on their performance also. With those officers that are being overpaid, if you have complaints against you, then that should reduce your salary.
Right.
Because if you are providing that critical service to the community and it's appreciated, then hey, we're going to be happy to pay you top dollar. But if you're failing at doing so, then you shouldn't even be on the job. And a lot of them are given that immunity through that, what is it that Amish is advocating for? The
Qualified immunity?
Qualified immunity for officers. Yeah, the Police Bill of Rights. That's that extra layer of protection that gives them legal, protection when it comes to these violations of their constitutional oath. That's their job.
Right. I know that where you are is a complete different demographic because you're in California, right?
Yeah.
And so it's 40 million people there. There's only about 3.5 million in Connecticut. And so the demographics are so different. And I get what you're saying, that particularly if those salaries are overinflated, but even still, right? And I don't argue your point, but one of the things that I'm thinking though, is that from what you're saying, we just need reform in how policing is done and how payout is done, because I do believe that they need to get paid based on performance. You understand what I'm saying? And I believe if they kill an innocent life in the name of racism or bigotry, they don't need to get paid at all. What they do need to get paid is called jail. It's called prison, the same way that we would get paid if we killed somebody. And so I think that the system, it needs more of an eagle-eye view than just defunding the police. I think if we just defund the police, that's not going to solve the problem, because I think that the problem will still be there and may even intensify. I just believe that we need to get some policymakers that stop racist policies that has been lasting forever. I mean, racist policies in policing has been now for 120 years. So that's a long time. So I think that we need to have real hard and serious conversations that will at least address these things. The Libertarian Party has been addressing these things for years and have been being ignored. And for the most part, when somebody wants to get a great soundbite, they come to the Libertarian Party. Even like what John Monds was saying, somebody's going to steal what you said on the Republican or Democrat side. I'm telling you right now, you should have copyrighted what you said. Well, that's what they do.
We're about to run out of time, but we have to look at the amount of laws. One thing, the Constitution came up, and if you look at the 13th Amendment, it didn't free folks. It legalized slavery.
Right.
And when you look at people being murdered for selling loose cigarettes, or even allegedly passing a fake $20 bill. Now, these things shouldn't mean a death sentence to anybody.
Right.
But we have to look at these laws, because if you can criminalize everything, then you can enslave everybody. And that's a lot of what's going on. So all aspects of this whole so-called criminal justice system needs to be reformed. So, but that's what we're working on. And I'm proud to be a part of this party. And anybody who's watching needs to go to lp.org and just compare what we believe in to those other parties. And I think if you truly want freedom, then you'll get on board and get on the freedom train.
I'm telling you.
And I want to say that I am very proud to have you guys in the party. You guys are great. You guys have done great work. And it makes me excited to be part of a party that's doing such amazing work and has such amazing people across the country. All of your states are states that I have fond connections to. Georgia, Savannah's where I had my honeymoon. I grew up in Manchester, Connecticut, right by Harvard.
Wow.
My brother lives in Oakland, California. So you guys in states that are close to my heart. But,
wonderful.
As we wrap up, I just want to give an opportunity for you guys to tell people where can they follow you guys, because you guys are great. You guys have a lot to say. I want to make sure that people after today can still keep following what you're saying. So where can they find
check me out on YouTube. Everybody hits me up on YouTube or Facebook. Either or, hit me up and stay in contact. YouTube is probably even better. I'm always Twitter as well. Hit me on Twitter at Dr. Aaron Lewis 1 on Twitter. On YouTube, Aaron Lewis on YouTube. Look me up. I'm the caramel bald head black dude. You can't miss me. You can't miss me with the big nose. That's me, right? Click, subscribe. All you got to do.
That's what's up. Okay, my name again is Nickolas Wildstar, former two-time candidate for California governor and mayor of Fresno. If you want to find out more about me, all you got to do is visit my website, governorwildstar.com. That again is governorwildstar.com. Governor, wild like an animal, star like in the sky.com. And all of my social media connections are there, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So definitely connect with me on those platforms also. I would say anybody out there, there we go. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So anybody that wants to get involved with me, I'm a raptivist. That's basically a rapper that uses the art of music to, express what's going on in the world politically and to be involved in, community activism. That's exactly what I am. So you can get my music off of SoundCloud. But I would say to anybody out there that wants to support the Black community that's watching, the best thing to do is to help us really take back the community with these candidates here, these people right here that really want to make policy change, everlasting policy change that's not going to only help out the Black community, but help out every community in the entire society. So please definitely donate, okay? Donate to all of our efforts, political efforts, and our activism as well. GovernorWildstar.com. Again, click on donate, and you can please make a contribution, because I am forming an exploratory committee for my campaign for governor of California in 2022. But if this recall is successful, then we'll have a special election here in California, and I'll be running my campaign sooner than later. So definitely please find out more about me and connect with me, and let's bring back liberty.
I would say don't follow me. I want you to lead. So, check out the party. Seriously, get involved in your community, whether it's in politics or community service or whatever it takes, to educate yourself about really what it means to be free and find your space, get in and put in the work. So, I mean, there's a lot of room out there for everybody.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you so much. And to everybody out there, tomorrow's Juneteenth. Please do celebrate it with the sentiment that's out there and reach out to somebody and just love freedom and just give everyone a hug and enjoy a day to just bask in the idea of freedom. So this is LPTV. Thank you very much. Signing out.
Let's do it again sometime.
All right.